Because actually, when you think about it fundamentally in the future, if everything's our AIs, we're going to crave like real humans more in some way. We're gonna certainly love how automated some things will be, but we'll actually want to talk to people every now and then. It's pretty natural.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome to AI in the Future of Work, episode 296. I'm your host, Dan Turchin, CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for IT and HR employee service. If you enjoy what we do, please tell a friend and give us a like and a share on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. If you leave a comment, I'll be sure to share it in an upcoming episode, like this nice one from Lisa in Cincinnati, who says her bookshelf is full of recommendations from this podcast, and her favorite episode is the conversation with Tom Wheeler. Lisa looks forward to listening each Monday while walking her dogs. For those who haven't heard the great discussion with Tom Wheeler, former FCC chair, check it out. Tom's the author of Techlash, Who Makes the Rules in the Digital Gilded Age. We learn from AI thought leaders weekly on this show, and of course, the added bonus, you get one AI fun fact each week. Today's fun fact. McKinsey recently published a fascinating study of enterprise AI adoption. And here are 5 highlights from that opus. Number 1, Gen AI use cases could yield $2.6 to $4.4 trillion with a T in annual enterprise value by 2030 across the 60 use cases they analyzed. Number 2, 60 to 70% of work hours in today's global economy could be automated with AI. Number 3, in an analysis of 5,000 customer service agents, those using AI resolved 14% more issues per hour worked, and their average time spent resolving each issue decreased by an average of 9%. Number 4, time to train new customer service agents decreases from an average of 6 to 9 months to 3 months with AI. And lastly, number 5, 20% of survey respondents say the biggest impediment to broader AI adoption is data quality and a concern for poor data leading to potential trust and safety violations. As always, we'll link to the full article in today's show notes. Now, shifting to today's conversation. Today's guest, at least in this host's opinion, is one of the top 2 enterprise software CEOs on the planet who best leads with heart, humor, and humility. The other, of course, is Aaron Levy from Box. Aaron, if you're listening, you're due up next on the hot seat. It's here waiting for you. Nick Mehta is the legendary CEO of Gainsight, a company he joined more than 11 years ago and has since grown into a juggernaut in the customer success space with more than 20,000 customers and $100 million in ARR. Thanks to great former guest Carl Moscofian, Gainsight CEO, for the intro to Nick. Prior to Gainsight, Nick was a serial entrepreneur and CEO, having led LiveOffice before it was acquired by Symantec and co-founding ChipShot back in the 90s. He serves on the boards of F5 and PubMatic. Nick received his bachelor's degree in biochem and his master's in CS from Harvard. Among other things, Nick's the author of the popular blog Metaphysical Musings, where he mostly shares his love of Taylor Swift with nearly 27,000 subscribers. Nick's a rapper, an OG shoe dog, and a YouTube celebrity where he's published over 50 parody videos. To get to know Nick, you've got to go YouTube this one right now. The 2022 tribute to him by his adoring employees, titled, "I Promise That You'll Never Find Another CEO Like Nick."
Oh, you did your research. You did your research, Dan. Well done.
Man, I've been looking forward to this one. And without further ado, Nick, it's obviously my pleasure to welcome you to the podcast. Let's get started by having you share a bit more about your illustrious background and how you got into the space.
What the heck can I share? That was very kind of you. Thanks. All the videos are the most important thing. Absolutely. I'm like, I have one skill, which is truly like rewriting songs to be about customer success and SaaS. The good news is, by the way, I'll tell you, Dan, up front, we're going to talk about AI. ChatGPT isn't yet good at that. So I'm actually feel like I have job security, at least till GPT-5, where it can't, that's the one thing it can't do. It can probably do all the other parts of my job better than I can. But, we launched Gainsight 11 years ago, obviously very passionate about really just changing the way companies think about their business model from, a lot of companies focus on how do I get new customers? How do I sell to new customers? To saying, look, in all these new business models, whether you think of SaaS, consumption, subscription, anything that's like a new model, they're all about the idea that the customer lifetime value is really where the money comes from. And to drive customer lifetime value, it's not as simple as being transactional. It's really like monitoring that customer. What are they doing? How are they using your product? What value they're getting, and driving the right action at the right time to get them the maximum value, get them to use your product better so that they stay and grow with you. And that's all about like, how do I drive efficient growth in my business? We started out with software for customer success teams, which is a role in companies to manage customers more proactively. But now we've gotten into a whole bunch of other areas. They're all about the customer journey, like building a community for your customers, training your customers, driving adoption in your product. And we have more coming. And, no surprise, we can talk a lot about it. It's amazing the impact now that we can have by putting generative AI under all that. We've shipped dozens of features already and more coming because, you think about all this customer interaction data, so much of it is conversations, emails, calls, and now you can actually mobilize that. It's really magical, but we'll dive into that, I'm sure.
So in this podcast, we talk about AI and the future of work, and a lot of the conversations have to do with what jobs AI can do are more likely tasks and which ones they can't. And so in your space, your space is the biggest celebration of humanness and
Right.
What it means to be successful at work. And a lot of those very same customers that you're championing are out there thinking about when and if and how AI is going to replace them. What's your perspective on what's happening?
It's interesting. As we record this, we just had our big company conference, or customer conference last week, and a couple thousand people there. And I talked about this challenge. Like look, I'm a hardcore tech nerd, sci-fi, think about the philosophy of the mind. If you're that person, this is the craziest, best time like ever. But you also have to be empathetic that it's a lot of anxiety. You can see it on Twitter. You can see people are anxious in every job. And we all know that if you watch AI books or videos or something 20 years ago, people thought, it's going to be the truck drivers and the people working in factories. And you're like, nope, those jobs are going to be safe for quite a while because it turns out like physical dexterity of robots is actually pretty hard. But it turns out that the job that is the most directly affected is knowledge workers, right? Software engineers, marketers, and everyone. Now, I think that the way I think about it is you have to have balance both two things at once. One is, again, maybe I don't think it's hyperbole, maybe you agree with it. I truly think it's the biggest thing probably in human history. Like I always joke, maybe it's not like the internet, it's much bigger. Maybe it's like fire. Maybe that's the analogy. But on the flip side, it's like the biggest disruption to humanity too. And so we have to be empathetic about that. And so we had our conference last week and I talked about like the excitement and the anxiety, and both are legitimate feelings. And how do we help our teams get to the other side of this? Now, we talk about, we call it human first AI. And the idea is our company purpose statement is to be living proof you can win in business while being human first. It's been that forever, for 10 years. And the idea there was human first is about remembering the person on the other side of the Zoom is a human being, whether they're a customer, a prospect, a churn client, a candidate for a job, an alumni that left your company, even an investor, they're all human beings first. And we forget that. And now what we realize is like AI can be used. Of course, there will be job loss, there's no doubt, but also can be used to augment humans to help them be better and love their jobs more and things like that. And so the way I think about it specifically is there's going to be parts of jobs that are about human connection. And those are going to be more important than ever. Because actually, when you think about it fundamentally in the future, if everything's our AIs, we're going to crave like real humans more in some way. We're going to certainly love how automated some things will be, but we'll actually want to talk to people every now and then. It's pretty natural. And so I think, there's a role called a customer success manager, and the whole job is to build a relationship with you, understand your goals. Some of that's still going to be there. But part of that job is like entering data and updating systems and troubleshooting issues. That stuff, the customer success manager doesn't like it. The end customer, it creates like back and forth. It hurts, everything sucks. And so can we automate, we call it remove grunt work. So at our conference, we had called it human first AI playbook, and there were 6 principles in that. And one of them was use AI to remove grunt work. And that's true, by the way, for customer success managers. That's true for support people, where they spend tons of time back and forth. You were quoting this from McKinsey, right? That's true for salespeople. That's true for sales engineers. Every job has a lot of grunt work, and we can remove that. And then, of course, the question is, what do you do with that extra time? You mentioned 15% reduction or something from McKinsey and support, effort, right? People using that. And then what do you do about that? And you mentioned Aaron Levy from Box, who's awesome, and he's so great. I've spent a lot of time with him, and he had a great tweet recently about what will people do with this, and are they going to fight for? Coding is obviously the center of the storm of generative AI. Will they fire 80% of their engineers? Probably not. They probably have a backlog of a million things they never could do, and now they can actually do them. This is his tweet. It's not my idea. I was like, that's very compelling. And so I think by every job category, there'll be some where, people will reduce teams. There's just no doubt. But there'll be others where they'll be like, we can do better. So for example, in customer success or sales, a lot of it is look at how do we drive more revenue? And I think most people will be like, great, now we can actually do more with our clients, improve our retention, improve our revenue and our growth and all that. Support, I think, is going to be complicated. My guess is the front lines of support will become pretty automated. I think they will. This is probably hard to imagine. But some of that will be reinvested into the more advanced support so that when you have that issue that an AI can't solve and you get to that human, you're not having that annoying experience of re-explaining things or they don't get it. And that person is really going to help you, right? Because that's, I think, one of the challenges we all have is you either deal in support with the frontline person who doesn't, you're like, why does that job even exist? Well, because they don't really know how to solve your problem. Or you have the backline person doesn't understand you. And I think there's that kind of, one of the things I've wrestled with as an analogy is healthcare is also going to change. Healthcare will change much more slowly because healthcare changes slowly all the time. But one of the questions I actually genuinely don't know the answer to, I'd be interested in your opinion on it, is in the future, we have primary care people and we have specialists, right? And I could imagine one world, which is, look, I don't want to have to deal with the primary care. I want to go straight to the specialist because I just, I don't have to explain that. Get me to the specialist, right? That's one approach. The other approach is like, look, my primary care person is the human. They understand me. They build a relationship. They can use AI to deliver some of what I'll call the basic specialties. Now, if you have some advanced, I hope, God forbid, you have brain cancer. No, you don't want to just have an AI. Like you want a specialist in oncology who works with an AI. But I think we can do some stuff to humanize the experience in this case, for customers, as well as then give some specialist knowledge. So I do think some jobs will be affected, but I believe in general, people will reinvest that into better value for their customers.
Great former guest on this podcast, Dr. Shiv Rao, who's the CEO of a company called Abridge, unicorn company. They recently raised over $100 million. And on the podcast, we talked about doctors have essentially become computers with scalpels.
Yes.
And what's happened in the process is like all the humanness of the patient-caregiver interaction is gone. And what Abridge is actually doing is using AI to supplement all those kind of mechanical tasks that took the doctor away from being present.
Oh my God. When I'm in the doctor's office and the amount of time they have to type stuff into the computer, and I'm sure they hate it too, right? They're not looking at me. Nobody likes it. So yeah, that's a great example.
The traits that are innate to the human experience, things like empathy,
exactly,
rational thinking, and synthesizing ideas, those won't go out of fashion. AI is never going to do those kinds of things. Nick, I want to take a case study, and I want that to be the Nick Mehta case study. I referenced in the opener, you're one of few CEOs whose employees publish a rap song about how much they love you. And just, to ground that in this conversation, like, employees are never going to sing about their AI boss. Like, they're just not going to have that connection. So, like, you've done something special about, I assume it's very intentional, the culture you've created at Gainsight. Talk about how you approach culture building and, how that kind of celebrates the humanness of your team.
So funny because, of course, no surprise. It's like the number one question I get, along with like, why'd you do a rap video? But beyond that, I get this question a lot. And, it's intentional in a way, but in many ways it's not. And the reason I'll describe the not, and then I'll describe some tactics could be useful for people, some tactics. So the unintentional part is it's just how I want to live my life. In other words, when people ask me about culture, they're like, what are the tactics? I'm like, let's just start. Why do you care? Like, why do you care about culture? Like you as a CEO or founder, or leader, why do you care? And, they'll be like, I want to attract and retain employees, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, cool. That's a certain kind of culture. If you ask me why I care, Dan, it's like literally the reason I do my job. Especially now, I've been fortunate, very lucky to financially and all that do well. It's just the reason I do my job. That's it. In fact, we did a deal with a private equity firm and it was Vista and it was amazing. And so I had a choice, stay or go. And I was like, no, I want to keep doing this because I just love these people, like both the customers and the employees. And I love the idea of like, you have this, people work so much. Yeah. People talk about work as a means to an end. I don't think that's right. I think for a lot of people, work is a big part of their life chronologically in terms of time it is. And so you have a chance as a CEO, founder, leader to create something that you're proud of, a culture, and that's literally if you said later on, years from now, nobody remembers your company anymore. By the way, they won't remember who the heck Gainsight is, right? They won't remember this technology will be super dated. All that I'll remember is like these amazing people having the chance to bring them together. And, we have a lot of alumni and they just always reminisce about their times at Gainsight and the friends they've made. So you can tell this is what brings me joy. By the way, I'm not judgmental. There's some people who are like, I just want to make a ton of money. I'm like, that's awesome. In fact, I love the purity of hedge fund people. They're like, whatever, Nick, that human first stuff is BS. I just want to make more money. Cool. Good for you. And there's other people like, I just care about building technology. I don't really deal with people. Good for you. But if you're the kind of person who cares about it, that's where it becomes the most genuine. I think people can tell whether something is a means to an end or the end. For me, it's the end. Frankly, making money is the means to the culture, which is weird, but just who I am. So that's number one. Now that's just, I would tell anyone, figure out your why. Be authentic about that. Be transparent. Hey, we want to have a great culture because we want to win. We have a great culture because we want to actually, recruit people. Great. Don't lie to them. I remember having a lunch early in Gainsight, like 2014 or something, where we went to lunch with a bunch of CEOs and we had our values from day one. And I was like, hey, we're like talking with other SaaS CEOs. Hey, are you guys big into culture? They're like, yeah, we're all big into culture. It's huge. And I'm like, you guys have values? They're like, oh yeah, they're so important to us. I literally went around and I was like, what are your company values? And most of them could only name a few of the values. One of them couldn't name any. And the guy who couldn't name any was like, I need to go to our website to see. And I was like, oh my God, like seriously, that's the problem is inauthenticity. If you said, what's the core thing? Be authentic. Say what you care about. If you want to make money, what person I really admire, by the way, is Brian. I've never met him, but Brian Armstrong, CEO of Coinbase. And, it's funny because like he said this, he's always been this truly independent thinker. And a friend of mine works for him. And like he had this in 2020 when there's a lot of stuff happening in the world and, a lot of stuff of like companies doing performative stuff on social media. And by the way, I don't throw stones. Like we weren't, we were falling into some of that too. And he had this blog post about we're a mission-driven company. And our mission is democratizing financial stuff through crypto, right? Or whatever, something like that. He said, we don't get involved in other stuff. If it's related to crypto legislation, we're going to get involved. And I love the purity of the thinking because if you work at Coinbase, you know why you're at Coinbase. And if you want to work at Coinbase, you believe in that stuff and you don't want to work, the worst are the diluted cultures where they're like, we're about values and social change and also making a ton of money and blah, blah, blah. And by the way, like, yeah, we care about our employees, but yeah, also I want a private jet as a CEO. And also I'm doing layoffs, but I really care about my employees. And, and by the way, you can do layoffs, all these things, we've done layoffs. It's just being super authentic with people. That is to me, the most important thing. Now, tactics, one thing that helps a lot is hypertransparency. No problem. It's very common, but really humanized hypertransparency. So I've sent an email to the company and actually even my last company every Sunday night. So call it 15 years. Actually, even my job before that. So call it 20 something years, every single Sunday night. And the email is basically 3 things you need to know about what's happening at Gainsight, like core messages, what I'm doing this next week, like literally all my meetings, and then something happened in my personal life. And that last part is very important because it humanizes who you are. So I share my kids, I share hard stuff. My dad had dementia, passed away, kids' mental health issues. I've shared tons of stuff. My employees all know it. And they feel much more of this like real human connection. And then all of our employees share it. And then, at the end of every employee event, I do like a closing keynote and I talk about real personal stuff, being lonely as a kid, dealing with my dad's stuff, all these types of things. Then I do that at our customer conference where we just had it last week. And at the end, I talked about like personal challenges I've dealt with to these 2,000 people, many of whom I've never met. And so this vulnerability and openness and transparency is so big. That's number one. Number 2 is holding leaders to the highest possible standard. So what does that look like? Number 1 is obviously when people are the leaders, meaning my direct reports aren't living up to the values, you either coach them or fire them. And I've made lots of mistakes where I lent too long. But then more recently, like I'm pretty I tell everyone, I'm like, to those who much is given, much is expected. And I will fire a leader pretty quickly if they have not living up to values. When people take a job at Gainsight, they get a document before they take the job, a leadership expectations document, which we've written down and revised a few times. And that's down to the level of like how you do one-on-ones and how you treat people and things like that. So it's our values, but with much more depth. We are doing actually real time right now, and I've done it before, a survey. This one is, I had to get my leadership team comfortable with it, but I'm like, an anonymous survey, which I generally don't believe anonymous, but for this one, I wanted real honesty. Rate every leader in Gainsight, the top leaders, meaning my direct reports, on our values, as well as a few other things. And I'm going to use that to talk about how everyone's doing that. Yeah. So I think that's the second thing, is holding leaders to the highest standard possible. Then the third thing, if I had to think about the third one you can do, is, really make the values or whatever your cultural tenets are part of the language. We have this principle of human first business, and then we have 5 values. If you are in a Gainsight meeting with a customer or internal, I almost guarantee you will hear at least one of those values in 100% of meetings. Like literally, one of our values is childlike joy. Oh, this is an example of childlike joy. We talk to our customers about these values. Our customers, I bet you could quiz, we have tons of customers, quiz them. What are the Gainsight values? They wouldn't get all 5. They'd get 1 or 2 at least, So yeah, so those are the 3. Define the why, be hyper transparent about you as a human being, internal, external, hold your leaders to the highest standard, make the values and culture part of the language.
Incredible. All the first time CEOs and entrepreneurs listening, replay that one back, print it out. It's like the 95 Theses. Take that to the door of the office. That was a really thoughtful answer, Nick.
Awesome.
So just before we started the recording, we're talking about a bit of a lightning rod in the Silicon Valley CEO community. My former CEO, Frank Slootman, who famously generated a meme in the customer success community by essentially saying fire all of customer success because, quote, maybe I'm slightly paraphrasing, but customer success is everyone's job. Nick, you're on trial. So defend, in light of comments from those like Frank, why is there a need for customer success?
Well, yeah, I've had this one discussion a lot, so I definitely have lots of thoughts to say. I'll say a couple things just as broad, and then I'll give it some sincere answers. Broadly, I would say in my whole life, I've always wanted an arch nemesis. I just never thought it would be like a Dutch billionaire. But you know what? Beggars can't be choosers. I got my arch nemesis. And then the second thing is, it's funny because, as you just alluded, like he actually wrote this book called Amp It Up, which, did you read Amp It Up, Dan? I read it. It must be interesting reading it, having worked for him. So you should tell me more about that.
And I've read excerpts of it on the podcast as well.
Yeah, great. It's a good book. I liked it. And there's one chapter I don't like. I'm like flipping through this book. I'm like, wait, why do you have to come at me, Frank? Come on. There's a lot of other people to come at besides Nick Mehta. You don't even know who I am. But now, joking aside, I wrote this blog post called 10 Reasons Billionaire Frank Slootman is Wrong, which is perfect clickbait. And a few things I talked about. Number one is that, customer success as a concept, I agree with him that it's a company-wide thing. But like everything, you sometimes need somebody who wakes up and just is the orchestrator and the champion. So like I would throw back to him. I agree, Frank, you're right. So we don't need salespeople either, because everyone's job is sales. Do we need engineers? Because everyone's job is the product. And so, no, come on, like need people that are specialized. And that's number one. Number two is that, I think that he lived, he retired now, but lived in a business that is like a true monopoly, or maybe a duopoly now with Databricks. And you just, once you use it, you can't leave. And it's truly one of the best businesses ever made. I mean, they're genius, right? And so I get it. Mileage may vary. Most companies aren't like that, right? Especially a lot of companies require change management and things like that. It's just not there. Third is, people are giving commercial responsibility to customer success people. The salesperson doesn't do the renewal anymore. And then the person drives revenue. And a lot of companies, honestly, they don't want the salesperson to drive the renewal. They want the salesperson to get new business, So Snowflake has a different model, but I think in the other companies' models, CSM has a financial responsibility as well. Some companies actually will sell the customer CSM as part of a services package. So then it's actually self-funding. And then the final one, which I think it'll tie to your background pretty well. Yes, he thinks he's anti-customer success. Yes, he's become famously anti-CS. And yes, go on LinkedIn, type in ServiceNow and Customer Success Manager, and you'll find like 1,000 people. Because after he left, they hired a ton of people into this. In fact, I spoke to their all hands for their CS team, and it was gigantic. And I was like, wait, this is ServiceNow, your old CEO. Actually, it literally was like, your old CEO was anti this, and the guy who was interviewing me just like uncomfortably laughed. I was like, okay, I've hit a nerve. So
Customer success is a job function, but customer obsession.
that's right, and you need both. You can't just have a CSM team. That doesn't work either. But you just need a mix of both. I think of it as like a T, right? So you need this team that's going deep, and then you need everyone to be aligned.
So, as the leader of Gainsight, whether or not you signed up for it, you're the CEO of an AI company. Because every software company, every enterprise software company, heck, every company is an AI company.
Whether they know it or not, exactly.
Absolutely. And the sooner we can start thinking about infusing principles of AI into the fabric of our organizations, the more successful we'll be. The question for you is, as a leader who just became an AI leader, what does it mean to practice AI responsibly? What do you feel is your responsibility as you lead out, an AI strategy?
It's a great question. Obviously, there's like a different responsibility discussion at the LLM foundational level, which I think is really where more of it is. Some of it's at this application level and lots there. I think that a couple of thoughts. Number one, before I get to responsibility, although it's probably a broader theme, let me just do the 3-act play of what I hear from many CEOs who I just, not Aaron Levy because he's super AI forward, but I'm in so many discussions where like, yeah, AI is so overhyped. We had chatbots in 1975, or then that's act one. And then act two is, and by the way, what about security? I don't trust OpenAI. What about the legal implications? Blah, blah, blah. And then act three is new CEO comes in. So actually, act three is you're fired or your company goes out of business. And so I think we should figure all those things out. Like I was at our conference last week and one of our customers said, hey, how do I get my company comfortable with security around generative AI? And I was like, hey, we got all the things. We use Microsoft OpenAI Azure. We got SOC 2 certification. None of your data joins the LLM, blah, blah, blah. Whatever. The number one thing, all of your employees in your company are using ChatGPT right now and uploading files and typing in confidential data right now. It's happening everywhere. So wake up. Yes, figure these things out, but wake up to there's two risks here. One risk is there's legal and security and compliance issues. And the other risk is your company goes out of business. Like literally, I'm not a CEO who was actually leaning into this. I was on this virtual CEO advisory session on AI and it was depressing because most people just didn't get it at all. The other CEO, the only other one who got it, he's like, everyone, this is a level 5 extinction event for software companies. I'm like 100% right. And I'm not talking 10 years from now. I'm talking like a few years from now, So this is a really big change. And yes, responsibility. And so when we talk about our AI architecture, there's foundational models like OpenAI, and then there's our own, basically we call it a knowledge graph. And there's a security and privacy and response more in our world because it's less consumer. It's more security, privacy. And then on top of that, there's your various metadata, and then there's your applications that we plug into it. If you're an existing vendor, the truth is you have a huge opportunity because you have data, you have workflow probably of some kind. Customers want to buy AI from existing vendors. ServiceNow has like tons of AI now, right? Salesforce, Gainsight, obviously much smaller way. I think it's more challenging if you're an AI application startup. Actually, I think those are having a hard time now because it's just harder for them to sell. And so now the next level, leaning into it, I think everyone's different, but if you're a product-oriented CEO, you guys spend tons of time. There's nothing I spend more time on than generative AI. And honestly, it's interesting, a couple just examples. So we do a monthly internal AI summit, a few days every single month. I do like weekly demo deep dives. I actually we have a decent sized engineering team and I want to have them move fast. So they have to demo something to me relative to generative AI every week. We had our conference and there's a lot of debate about what the theme of the event was. It's like, okay, we should talk about this incremental feature of Gainsight. I was like, nope, the theme is human first AI. We're demoing the new AI. We have dozens of AI features already live. And I was like, we're showing that. And by the way, customers were like, oh my God, that was the best keynote Gainsight's ever done, best demos, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm just like, yeah, we did a lunch today with customers around human first AI. So it's just everywhere and making it the number one thing you spend time on. Now, I don't know about you, Dan, but even if you spend a lot of time on it, it's impossible to keep up with everything. Like it's truly impossible. But try it. If you haven't seen, I'm sure most people have seen the 4.0, ChatGPT 4.0, GPT 4.0 demos, which are mind blowing. And then the next gen, Gemini stuff or whatever. Stay on top of it. And then obviously underneath you, have the right people that are really focused on it. but don't outsource the understanding. This isn't, I don't know, accounting. Yeah, I'm not an expert in accounting. I don't think I ever need to be. But you got to be deep on it if you want to be a software CEO, in my opinion.
So a mutual friend and good friend of the podcast, Dave Kellogg, who I call the SaaS Whisperer,
Yes.
every year comes on this podcast and talks about his predictions, much of which revolve around CS metrics, customer success metrics, like net revenue retention and customer lifetime value and trends.
Yeah, I send him a bottle of wine every year right before he writes a blog post. Yeah,
is that what does it? I thought it was Scotch. I didn't know it was
yeah, either Bordeaux or Scotch, one of the two. Yeah, exactly.
He definitely imbibes before joining me on the podcast. So let's say I'm just channeling my inner Dave Kellogg, and he would say, a lot of those kinds of core metrics that we use to measure the impact of customer success are data driven. And, to the points you were just making, really anything that's data driven is going to be certainly in the domain of something that AI will be incorporated into those products. So let's say Nick and Dan are having a version of this conversation in 5 years. It's 2029 and we're talking about the state of customer success. How has not Gainsight, but the field of customer success changed? Because all the data that stores the answers is going to be used to be able to maybe automate or semi-automate the improvement of these key performance indicators.
Yeah, totally. I think there's a few big things that are going to happen, and you're probably the same as me. People quote 5 years. I'm like, whatever, 5 years. This stuff's going to happen. Some stuff's going to happen in a year or less. So a few things that are big challenges in kind of the world of managing customers right now that I think can change radically. Number one is people spend, like you were saying before, people spend so much time on the grunt work that you're using. We're talking about the doctor's office, right? Data entry, basically. And so if you're a knowledge worker, a customer-oriented knowledge worker, sales, CS, whatever, in a software company or any B2B business, you spend a lot of time updating data, contact information, account names, and so on. That can go away. In fact, we're doing stuff on that now. It's like an alpha where, pull the email signature information out, pull the last conversation with the customer, figure out their title, their email address, recommend the update in Gainsight or Salesforce or CRM, whatever it is. So removing grunt work frees up a lot of time, right? Automatically create decks, presentations, emails. That stuff is honestly what I'll call commodity Gen AI use cases now, but there's a lot you can do there. The second thing though is then the second challenge companies have, because data has been largely entered manually, is data quality. So they're like, yeah, we want to figure out how to predict churn or whatever, but our data isn't good, right? And what's cool on data quality is, number one, you have this new set of data, which was unusable before, which was basically all the conversations, emails, and all that. Can do much beyond text search of it. Now you can actually mine it, look at sentiment, and you can do some really cool things like, sentiment of the different stakeholders. Now with multimodal AI, look at the video. What's their expressions? Are they engaged? You and I both know, tell if somebody's engaged, but if you're a 22-year-old CSM, you probably can't even tell. If you have 10 people in a video meeting, do you know? I can actually do it, but I've just done this stuff so long. And so you can start looking at all these subtle indicators that give us better data, and then you can clean up the other data. I was just actually had lunch with this customer, and they sell into healthcare IT or healthcare. They have a healthcare IT solution, and one of the things they're using generative AI right now for is all the data files that come in from these insurance companies and stuff. You can imagine there's tons of data issues, and before there's like professional services people cleaning it up or writing scripts, and now the generative AI is looking at column name mismatches, record count mismatches, stuff like that. Really, it's truly amazing. And then the third thing I think is we're going to be able to push more into a self-service model for these low value activities. So right now, we all are skeptical of self-service as humans, as consumers, as business people, because what do we have often? An IVR system, press 2 for X, or worse yet, say your name and it just can never hear it. And then you say, I'm yelling into the phone, right? Or you're in a chat bot that is so soul sucking, or you're in the AT&T support site and you're trying to get a basic question and none of the answers come in and can't find the phone number. Like that's our life, right? Is in self-service today. But what about a new world where that self-service knows everything about you, everything about your experience, all of your emails, every one of your support interactions? You go to this portal, or maybe it's in the app or it's on mobile, and it's recommending the next thing to do. It lets you chat with your CSM directly if you want, lets you resolve issues on your own. There's just so much we can do. Another example, we actually make also customer community software and customer training software. And imagine it's recommending the next customer that you should connect with, like a peer. It's recommending training, but not like video, like old school training, but like almost like a tutor experience. If you saw the the Sal Khan demo with 4.0, GPT 4.0, it's like an interactive tutor experience. And we've actually done proof of concepts and all this stuff. Like it's very doable. And so you think about that digital experience and really enabling the customer with an experience that feels more human, even though it's automated. And again, takes all the low value work off the plate of your employees so they can do more high value work.
And Nick, unbelievably, we're about out of time. And I think we got to, about 0 of the topics we prepared.
We could do so many, yeah.
Which was awesome. But I'm not letting you off the hot seat without answering one last question for me. Nick, what's your advice to that kid leaving the Harvard Yard in Cambridge, a biochem major? Now, you're a CEO, a mogul, a rapper.
I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know. At least a rapper. What would you tell that kid?
In 2024 or 1998 when
the Nick today, what would you tell the kid?
The pace of change is going to be unimaginable. And the most important skill is not coding or anything else. I'd say there's 2 critical skills. One is truly being able to learn and evolve at a really rapid pace, because the LLMs are evolving at a rapid pace and the GPUs are evolving. So we have to keep up. So your ability to keep up is the most important skill. The second one, though, is I would say we're going to in the 20 years or whatever, 25 years that probably both of us have been working there, it was all like, hey, you get your kids to go into STEM or whatever, right? I'm like, no. I mean, certain parts of STEM I think will still be there. But if you were an off the charts genius, you did your International Math Olympiad gold medalist, or go to computer science and be a PhD and build foundational models. If you're like, I want to go and work in a SaaS company and go build like a web application, whatever. No, those jobs won't exist. So go study humanities. That's it. Don't do biochemistry is great. I think there'll be tons of stuff there. But humanities, like philosophy, English, these things are actually going to be more important again. You think about prompt engineering, right? So that's what I would say. Humanities is going to have a resurgence.
Same thing I tell my kids.
Yeah, interesting. That's cool.
So I said that was the last question, but gosh, I'm getting in one last one. Out of morbid curiosity, Nick, we're both Swifties.
Oh, you too?
Absolutely.
Oh my God.
Thankfully, we both have cool kids who we've co-opted to being Swifties as well. So your favorite era, but more important than that, not just your favorite era, Taylor asks Nick to come perform a duet on stage.
Holy crap.
One song, my man. What is it?
Okay, so first of all, the second one, if Taylor asked me anything, I would just die on the spot. But favorite era is still Folklore, which I think is truly one of the best albums ever in music, because it was created in COVID and it's just amazing. And I love everything on Folklore. Even amazingly, Dan, I haven't, out of people on video, this says "To Live for the Hope of It All," which is from August, one of her songs on Folklore. So that's serious commitment to being a Swiftie. But
that was Nick's tattoo, for those of you who are listening.
Yeah, tattoo if you're listening. And then I do love Torture Post Department. So it's not going to be necessarily number one, but it's going to be up there. And then, you know what? It would be so fun, even though I'm a terrible singer, to belt out Cruel Summer with that audience. So that'd be fun. I'd love that.
I thought you were an Archer guy. I had you.
Archer's good. It's hard to pick a great. They're all so good. What's your favorite era? What's your favorite era?
I was going to be a contrarian. It's got to be Folklore.
Folklore's so good. I mean, so good.
Before things got dark, and I thought that was her. That was her, the essence of her.
Agreed.
And TPD, I got a little dark again.
It's dark. There's some dark in there, for sure.
Amazing poetry. She's an amazing poet. Nick, by the way, when you have you back, you can change the answer, so you get another shot at it.
Oh my gosh!
All right, this has been so much fun. We definitely shoot up all the time, but it was all good stuff. Nick, where can the audience learn more about your work and, of course, the great work at Gainsight that you're doing? Oh,
thanks. Yeah, I mean, obviously, Gainsight.com for a website, but follow me on LinkedIn. I write, as you alluded to, lots of posts about Taylor Swift, but also about SaaS and things like that. But look forward to connecting.
Excellent. Gosh, that's all the time we have for this week on AI and the future of work. As always, I'm your host, Dan Turchin from PeopleRain. And, of course, we're back next week with another fascinating guest.